Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Denker. Happy Monday. Hope everybody's having a fantastic... Actually, it's Tuesday. I'm losing track of days. So happy Tuesday. Corrected myself on there. On today's episode of Locked On Lightning, huge episode. If you follow us on Instagram or Twitter, you already know what's coming up. If you don't follow us on Instagram or Twitter, go ahead and follow us at LO_Lightning on Twitter and Locked On_Lightning on Instagram. We have a huge guest today on today's show, and that is Kenny Albert. We'll get to Kenny in just a little bit. But first, let's talk about two of today's sponsors. First off, betonline.ag. BetOnline.ag is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Baseball season is in full swing, and you can track all the action at betonline.com. Get all the latest news, odds, info, and sporting for all your sporting needs, including MLB, NBA, NHL, and all your UFC MMA action. Before the next pitch, head over to BetOnline on your laptop or mobile device and check out all the great sporting news, sign-up bonuses, and contest information. Head to the website right now or use your cell phone and sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus. That's 50, a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's BetOnline, your sportsbook experts. Use that promo code Locked On for a 50% welcome bonus. That's promo code Locked On for 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. And let's head on over to another one of today's sponsors, and that is Stat Hero. Do you know 85% of people who play fantasy sports lose? It is really that surprising. The game is rigged. It's rigged against you. You're playing against thousands of other lineups, not to mention experts who have more tools and more time. You don't stand a chance. Well, with Stat Hero, no more losing, no more, wasting your time. It's the first ever daily fantasy sportsbook that puts the player in control within reach, a control of winning. Here's how it works. Stat Hero shows you their lineups, dares you to beat them. It's you versus the house. And in a head-to-head fantasy matchup, you name the stakes, winner take all, you have the advantage. Stat Hero is showing you their lineups ahead of time. No one else does that. Who does that? Show me who else does that. Guess what? Nobody does that except Stat Hero. Go to stathero.com/lockedon. Sign up for free right now, and you could get three times back on your first play, giving you a 300% match. That's unheard of. Who else does that? Nobody except Stat Hero. You can go to stathero.com, use /lockedon. That's stathero.com/lockedon. All right. So without further ado, here's my interview with Kenny Albert. And we're back on Locked On Lightning. And on today's show, you might have heard his name before. I don't know if you've heard him somewhere watching any sporting event at any time. But joining me on today's episode of Locked On Lightning is the one and only Kenny Albert. Kenny, welcome to Locked On Lightning. How you doing?
I'm great, Adam. Thanks for having me on. How are you?
I'm doing well. As I know and as everybody knows, this last, I guess, year or so has been incredibly busy for everybody and crazy. And just there's a lot of things that have been happening to everyone, especially in the sports business and media. And your schedule is already hectic as it is. You have a full slate between hockey, you're doing basketball here, you're doing boxing now and then, you're doing football. First of all, how have you been able to cope with doing all of that and the COVID restrictions and just, being able to do all of that during all these crazy times?
Well, you're right. It has been a bit of a crazy schedule over the last 15, 20, 25 years, a bit of a jigsaw puzzle, fitting everything together. And during the last year and a half, since the start of the pandemic, from last March 13th, I guess, 2020, until I left for the bubble in Edmonton around August 5th, I think I was home for 146 consecutive days, which was certainly unusual during normal times, bouncing around on a plane every 3 or 4 days, sometimes 5 or 6 times a week, right? But then once I got home from Edmonton, right before the Lightning won their first of 2 straight cups, I actually called that Stanley Cup final from a studio in Stamford, Connecticut on Westwood One Radio when the Lightning beat the Dallas Stars. And then began the NFL season last year. We were traveling. We were in the stadiums, although with a lot of restrictions and protocol in place. And then once hockey started up, and I do a little bit of basketball, as you alluded to as well, for the most part, we worked the home games in the arenas and stadiums and the away games off monitors out of a studio. So that was a lot different for all of us. Definitely more challenging, but I think we all got used to it. And then come playoff time, in the first round of the 2021 Stanley Cup playoffs, I had a combination of games, both in person and out of a studio. But then from the second round on, we were traveling. I had Vegas, Colorado in round 2, the Lightning Islanders in round 3, and then, of course, the Stanley Cup final between the Lightning and Canadiens. So it was a bit of a different year, not as much travel. I would say 30 to 40 games off monitors, if not more. And we'll see what the future holds as far as whether we're back to traveling all the time or whether it's a combination of being in some arenas and in the studio for other games. But it's been a bit of a whirlwind. It was a lot of fun covering the Lightning over those last 2 rounds, a tremendous 7-game series with the Islanders, and then, of course, the 5-game series with Montreal, which was probably a little closer than a 4-1 series would indicate. The Canadiens winning that 4th game in overtime, Lightning coming back and winning a 1-0 game at home to wrap up the Cup. So a lot of fun, a lot different over the last 14 to 16 months. But, hopefully all the protocols and restrictions kept everybody safe and healthy. And now we move forward.
Yeah, and you put it perfectly. It was just weird, and you just had to adjust throughout the whole process of it. And kind of just backtrack, you mentioned you were in Edmonton and you were basically stuck there for the duration of the playoffs. And so what kind of how was that experience for you throughout that whole run?
Thinking back, Adam, it was so much fun for those of us who were there. Now, it obviously was not a good reason as to why we were there due to the COVID pandemic, but the NHL did such a tremendous job with both bubbles in Toronto and Edmonton, where I was. I was there for 37 days, so it was a year ago at this time. I arrived on August 5th. I spent the first 4 days in a quarantine in my hotel room. The good thing was there were like 4 or 5 hockey games on every day from both venues. So the days went pretty quick in the quarantine. I just watched hockey all day and prepared for the games that I would be working. And then I guess starting on August 9th or 10th, it was really a whirlwind. I think I worked 34 or 37 games while I was there, beginning with the first round. And then in the second round, I worked every game of both Western Series. You had Vancouver, Vegas, and Colorado, Dallas. So it was every day. And then into the conference final between Vegas and Dallas. And then, of course, the Lightning and Islanders were there at that point. But there were days in the first round of the playoffs where Pierre Maguire and I worked 3 games, 3 Stanley Cup playoff games in one day, twice. There were a number of days where we worked 2 games. And the one that stands out, Game 7, both Vancouver, Vegas, and Dallas, Colorado on the same day in round 2. So it was so much fun. It was hockey all the time. We were in a hotel 5 minutes from the arena, 5-minute walk. We had to stay in the bubble, literally. There were fences up surrounding the 2 hotels where the teams and all the TV personnel and the league personnel and the officials stayed. We were fenced in, 2 hotels and the arena. There were 5 or 6 restaurants where you could eat. We all felt safe because we were all tested every day. And you had to wear masks aside from when you were working. But we were eating at indoor restaurants because everybody was tested. So, thinking back, it was tremendous. You'd run into coaches and players. There was a plaza area outside Rogers Place, and you'd run into players, coaches, officials, and it was really only us. There were 300 or 400 people inside the bubble, and that was it. Calling games in the empty arena, I had to remind myself to keep up the energy and the enthusiasm. And again, the reasons we were there weren't great, but it was really a once-in-a-lifetime experience to have 8 teams in the first round playing in one arena, and then 4 teams in the second round and 4 teams in the conference finals. So, when I think back, it was among the events that I've worked that stand out the most throughout my career in broadcasting.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up, you actually beat me to the punch on that. I was going to ask you, how are you able to, remind yourself, just keep up the energy, give up the energy? Because I'm sure it was some sort of a daunting task when you first walked in those first couple of games and there's nobody in the arena but the players.
Yeah, it was strange. I went to a game before I worked a game. The day I got out of the quarantine, there was a Blackhawks game, I think against Vegas. I'm not sure who their opponent was. It was Vegas, I think, in the preliminary round.
Yeah.
So I sat there and without headphones on, I wasn't working, and I was about 20 rows up. And I went to about 5 or 6 games that I wasn't working, and I'm one of the only, quote, fans in the building. There were some security workers and, the maintenance crew in the building, and that was about it. So it was cool, actually. But you could hear everything. You could hear the chatter on the ice, the players, the coaches. I had one official, one of the referees, tell me that he could hear my call during the game down on the ice because we were only about 20 rows up. Since there were no fans in the building, they were able to set up our broadcast booth on the lower concourse. So that was different. But again, it was just so much fun. You couldn't really we couldn't get as much exercise as you normally would like because we were fenced in. There was a gym at the hotel, but one of the things that I did, I played ping pong every day. They had ping pong tables all over the place for the players and for the teams and the officials. So I played about an hour of ping pong every day. And, it was just good to keep the mind occupied and get a little bit of exercise, even though you're not really running around that much. Right. You can get a lot more exercise in ping pong than one would expect when you play it for about 20 or 25 straight days.
Yeah, I remember when the bubble first started and the players were getting acclimated to the environment. That was one of the things that came out, that there was these massive ping pong tournaments amongst the players on a daily basis. And
yeah, I heard that as well. Now, apparently in Toronto, there was some more open space near the hotels.
Yeah.
In Edmonton, it was a pretty condensed area. They did allow us to go, and it was still considered part of the bubble. They had an NHL bus with a security guard, so they were watching to make sure that you only went where you were supposed to, and there were no outsiders allowed in. But they actually opened up the football stadium where the Edmonton CFL team played for many years, and we were able to go there and run around and kick a soccer ball, throw a football, walk the steps, do laps. So that was still considered in the bubble because you literally went on a bus from inside the bubble right into the stadium. There were no outsiders involved, so I did that once. That was pretty cool to go and kick a football and kick a soccer ball around the stadium in Edmonton.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely forgot about that. And now that you say that, I remember that infamous picture of Rod Brindamore on the field with no shirt running around, and a lot of people were saying that he could still play. So kind of shifting towards the Lightning, what was the thing that surprised you the most dating back to the first Stanley Cup run, and then as coming towards this playoff run?
Well, I think losing to Columbus, and I know it's been well documented, getting swept in 2019, that obviously led to the reshaping of part of their mentality as far as the makeup of the team and acquiring the players such as Barclay Goodrow and Blake Coleman, David Savard this year. And I think that had a direct effect on winning the 2 cups, both under difficult circumstances. The first cup in the bubble, not being around their families for 70 days and winning it in front of an empty arena. And then even in the playoffs this year, limited fans early on, and then the situation during the final in Montreal where we all had to be in somewhat of a quarantine. They did get to win it on home ice, which was great for the Lightning and their families and the fans. But such a terrific management team, with the owner, Jeff Vinnick, Julian Brisebois right on down. I'm a big fan of John Cooper. I think he and his staff have done a tremendous job. And then, when you look at the players, and there were 4 or 5 or 6 guys that probably could have been considered for the Conn Smythe Trophy as playoff MVP. Braden Point, when you look at what he did earlier in the playoffs, and Ryan McDonough, Victor Hedman, of course, Kucherov coming back from the injury and not playing at all during the regular season. Steven Stamkos last year coming in and scoring a goal in the only game he played in during the final. The entire line of Coleman, Goodrow, and Gord. Some of the role players, Pat Maroon, Matthew Joseph. I think I've just named about half the roster, but to win 2 Stanley Cups in 10 months is not easy. Hockey, fans and media often think back and refer to the Islanders winning the 4 cups in a row in the early 80s, 19 straight series, and we haven't seen that since in almost 40 years. It's hard enough to win 2 in a row. And, we saw Detroit do it in 2007 and 8. We saw Pittsburgh in 2016 and 2017. But for the Lightning to do it under these circumstances during COVID and testing every day and not being around their families, you just have to give them so much credit. And like I said, some of the moves they made, Coleman, Gord, Savard, last year bringing in Kevin Shattenkirk and Zach Bogosian, and just guys, that added, both skill and grittiness. But I think it was that sweep at the hands of Columbus that sort of led to the change in mentality. They had the skill. Yeah. John Cooper likes to talk about the fact that, now in 2020 and 21, the Lightning would be content winning those 1-0 games, not just the 7-4 games, outscoring other teams. And we saw that 1-0 in both the conference final against the Islanders and the Stanley Cup final against Montreal. And, of course, tremendous goaltending. I didn't mention Andrei Vasilevsky yet, but he's been the best goaltender in the world over the last 2 years, and certainly well-deserving of the playoff MVP award.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything you say. That, of course. And,
to shut out 5 straight opponents in a series game, that's something that, we probably won't see again for a long, long time.
Yeah, and really the question I want to ask you, Kenny, is can they do it a third time? I think that they have done enough in the offseason to prove that they've replaced the players that need to be replaced. They brought back Zach Bogosian, who was on the first Cup-winning team. And really, I think if they win the third, not only, obviously, it's a huge accomplishment, it being a three-peat, but really, given the cap situation, I think that really this is probably probably the second most difficult Cup that a team has ever won, obviously the first being in the bubble. Do you think from what you saw from this team, that's a possibility?
I don't think you can count them out. There are a lot of good teams in their division, in the conference, in the league, so it won't be easy. Everybody's going to be gunning for them. They did lose a number of good players, as you know, and your listeners know, but the top 2 lines are pretty much intact. And by bringing back Bogosian for some depth on D, I know they lost Savard. Bringing in Corey Perry, what a story. Yeah. A guy who's won a cup earlier in his career. Now he's lost to the Lightning in the final 2 straight years with Dallas and Montreal. And now he joins the team. And I read the great Tom Jones column the other day on the recruitment by Pat Maroon and, the entire situation. I think he's a great addition, especially come postseason time.
Yeah, that's going to be fantastic to see, especially when the teams hit the ice and you see those 2 on the same line. And I feel sorry for any team that's going to have to face off against those guys 15 times a night. So kind of jumping from hockey to just your other fields of work, really, obviously, because of, the legacy in sportscasting with your family, what was the reason why you decided to get into broadcasting in the first place?
Well, I was always around it. As you mentioned, I had my father and my 2 uncles who were play-by-play broadcasters for a long, long time. And when I was 5 or 6 years old, my parents gave me a tape recorder for my birthday, a toy tape recorder. And, just always started mimicking my father and my uncles. I would do broadcasts in my bedroom off the television into the tape recorder. And it's really all that I ever wanted to do. And I would tag along and go to games in the various sports. And when I was old enough, I would start bringing a tape recorder to Madison Square Garden or Shea Stadium and broadcast games into the tape recorder. And it just was always a lot of fun, watching sports, studying sports, hearing stories. I always joke that family meals back in the day during birthdays or holidays or other celebrations, that felt like the first all-sports radio station. I would sit around and listen to all these stories. So there's really nothing else I would rather do. I never feel like I'm going to work, even though there's a lot of preparation and a lot of travel that goes into it. Never feel like I'm working. Played sports as a kid, wasn't very good. Actually played, believe it or not, Adam, played club hockey in college against John Cooper.
Wow.
We figured this out. The first time I met John was during the playoffs in 2015 in Montreal, ironically, when the Lightning played the Canadiens. And I had never met John before this. And Joe Micheletti and I were working the game, and we were at practice. And John saw me out of the corner of his eye, and he said, "When I'm done with the media, I have to ask you a question." And I'm thinking to myself, did I say something on the air about him that maybe got back to him that he didn't like? I didn't think I did.
Mm-hmm.
I had never even met the man before.
Yeah.
It turns out I played club hockey for NYU, New York University.
Mm-hmm.
He was at Hofstra. Now, I was aware that John attended Hofstra on Long Island and played lacrosse. I didn't realize that he played club hockey. And we did play against Hofstra back in 1988, 1989. And it turns out a friend of his from the Hofstra club hockey team who wound up working on Wall Street in New York for many, many years, and they kept in touch, somehow knew that I played for NYU, and he told John, if he ever broadcasts one of your games, let him know that we played against him. So I don't think they remembered me from the actual playing days or any of my skill or lack thereof, but we actually did play against each other over 30 years ago.
That's crazy how small of a world it is. And really, what is your favorite sport? You know, I'm sure every broadcaster, if you were to ask them whether they want to admit it or not, they have a preference. Is it hockey or are you more so into maybe football? You know, obviously a lot of people know you for what you do with Fox, and so what is your preference when it comes down to calling a game?
Well, I love all of them. It's like asking which kid you like the best if you have 4 or 5 kids, right? Growing up, hockey was my favorite. Now, the others were not far behind.
Right.
But love playing hockey. My goal was to broadcast hockey on the radio. That was what I wanted to do. And I was real lucky to get hired by the Baltimore Skipjacks, the Washington Capitals affiliate at the time in the American Hockey League. That was my first job in 1990. Our assistant coach was Barry Trotz. We were roommates on the road. So another small world story. I go from playing against John Cooper in 1989 to rooming in hotels all across the Northeast with Barry Trotz in 1990. So hockey was it. That was what I wanted to do. I was real fortunate, myself and Joe Buck and Tom Brenneman and Kevin Harlan. We were all young play-by-play broadcasters in the right place at the right time when Fox acquired the rights to the NFL away from CBS in 94. And we were all hired at a really young age and looking forward to season number 28, which is crazy to say, of the NFL on Fox. And, you know, it's like comparing apples and oranges. Love hockey. There's nothing like the Stanley Cup playoffs. But the adrenaline you have at 1 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon when they kick off an NFL game and you're doing the broadcast on TV, that's pretty special also. So it's really tough to compare. Love them both. Really enjoy doing basketball as well. And I've done baseball for many, many years, 10, 15 games a year. So love them all. Just had the opportunity to broadcast volleyball, believe it or not, during the Winter Olympics from Stamford, Connecticut. I was not in Tokyo, but did call beach volleyball and some indoor volleyball and a couple of baseball games from Stanford. So I love the variety. But as a youngster, as a teenager into my college years, hockey was it. That was what I wanted to do.
Yeah, that's crazy how you go from volleyball one day to football in a couple of weeks.
I mean, in the last, since early July, had the great fortune to call the Lightning winning the Cup on NBC, and then volleyball at the Olympics, and now getting ready for the NFL season.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how many hats you wear, and really, I'm sure there's some games that stick out to you. So really, when you look at all the games that you've covered across all these sports, what are, I'm not going to sit here and have you list them all out, but what is the one game, I guess, if you had off the top of your head, that really sticks out to you? There are a number of them, Adam. It's really ironic. The one that I get asked about the most often, and I've done more hockey and football games than the other sports, but the one that I get asked about the most is the Jose Bautista home run. The Toronto Blue Jays and Texas Rangers, the playoff series back in 2015. I was calling that series for Fox. In hockey, I've called a number of Stanley Cup final series, mostly on the radio, of course, this year on television. So I put the Lightning
and Montreal Game 5 right up there. It was my first Stanley Cup clinching game on the TV side. I think back to the New York Rangers winning the Cup for the first time in 54 years in 94. I called that one on the radio. 5 divisional playoff games in the NFL. The one that stands out would be San Francisco, New Orleans, back in January of 2012. Alex Smith and Drew Brees going back and forth with 4 touchdowns in the last 4 minutes. Called the Sugar Bowl with Howie Long and Terry Bradshaw as my partners in the booth. That was Notre Dame LSU back in 2007, so that's certainly up there as well. Have the opportunity to call about 20 Knicks basketball games with Walt Clyde Frazier every year. So I know it's a long answer to a short question, but also the U.S. women winning the gold in hockey in 2018 in Pyeongchang. That's certainly up there on my list as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll be leaving NBC, obviously, because NBC will no longer be broadcasting the NHL games. You'll be going over to TNT, being the main man there. What I wanted to ask you, though, about your time at NBC, what was the effect that Doc Emrick had on you while you two worked together?
Oh, he's the absolute greatest. As far as hockey play-by-play people go, I refer to Doc as the Vince Scully of hockey. And, so happy that he was able to go out on his own terms. He called the Lightning, defeating Dallas in the 2020 Cup, and announced his retirement a couple of years later. But I've known Doc for a long time. I actually did stats for him when he was filling in on Rangers radio back in the late 1980s, and he became a good friend and colleague. We spent 4 Olympics together, exchanging notes and information and pronunciation. So a great friend, a tremendous colleague, and really the voice of hockey over the last 30 years in North America. So a lot of us wouldn't be where we are without Doc Emrick. Still keep in touch with him, and just a wonderful person.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that Doc has basically handed the torch over to you to kind of lead the charge with hockey, you'll be over on TNT. And so all my listeners, make sure to go ahead and look out for Kenny when he's doing all the hockey games.
Appreciate the plug.
Obviously, for Buccaneer fans as well, they'll be seeing quite a bit of you this year with them trying to.
I hope so. I don't have the Bucs on my schedule the first 4 weeks,
but
hopefully down the line. I've called numerous games in Tampa. I worked with the great Rondé Barber for 3 years, and we were fortunate enough to call the game when he was inducted into the Bucs Ring of Honor a couple of years ago. So always enjoy doing Bucs games.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Kenny, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. Appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we can have you back on at, maybe when you have a lull in your schedule.
Well, I love it. Thanks, Adam. Really appreciate it. I enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of the summer, and look forward to getting back down to Tampa for both Lightning and Bucs games, and look forward to doing this again real soon as well.
And before we wrap things up on today's show, I just want to talk to you about another one of today's sponsors, and that is Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar in the world. They have tons of delicious flavors, so there's something for everyone. When you talk to a Built Bar fan, they're definitely passionate about their favorites. If you don't know the Built Bar flavors, well, you're missing out. They got some of the great ones and the classic ones. They got cherry barcia, raspberry, mint brownie, double chocolate, strawberry, orange, cookies and cream, and German chocolate. That's just to name a few. And the best thing about them, they don't only just taste great, but they're healthy for you too. They have 17 to 18 grams of protein, calories ranging from 130 to 180, and only 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. Amazing flavors, all tasty and all healthy. So go to BuiltBar.com, use that promo code Locked On, and you'll get 15% off on your next order. That's promo code Locked On for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. All right, just to wrap things up, huge thanks to Kenny Albert. Amazing that he took time out of his busy schedule. As you heard, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you know that this is really, he only has so much time between sporting events to where he has so much downtime. So, once again, huge thanks to him for taking time out of his downtime to really come on the show, recap his experience in the bubble as well as his career. So, yeah, huge thanks to him, and we hope to have him on the show in the future. So that's been it for today's episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Denker. I'll talk to you in the next one.